I've been told by everybody up on this roof that they're all off the roof. I am on the roof of exposure 4. Got fire through the roof of the fire building in the entire rear section.
Now remember, given the payday, has he been accounted for? Kate.
610B. That was the Mayday. 610B.
I'm here. We got a fire. 1.5-story, single-family dwelling. Fire shown from the second floor. Give me a second alarm on this.
Coming up to the top floor. I got people hanging out the top floor windows with a baby.
Commercial building. A lot of fire, a lot of smoke. Go ahead and strike a third alarm on my orders on this.
Got people on the front fire escape here with windows vented below them. We need somebody up there.
Yeah, let them know we got a job. I'm pulling up now. Second alarm, I got a 1-story single-family frame. Heavy fire showing from the attic.
So we're using all hands. We got one line stretch, fire on the 4th floor, second line being stretched. Primary searches are underway.
Hey, welcome to Old School. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my partner, Chief John Salka. And John, you know, we talk leadership a lot. We talk tactics and strategy a lot, and a variety of topics. Rapid intervention and all that different stuff. We've talked when we got to our leadership programs about, your people always come first. As an officer, as a company officer, it's always about your firefighters. It's always about, we signed up to do a job. We talked about that before, that this is, you screwed a helmet to your head, you became a public servant. And you always say in class, we signed up to do what in the fire service? And you always tell them, I just gave you the answer. It's what word? Service, right? And we go from there. But real quick, you talked about this once before about priorities. Before we get going where we want to, the topic we want to talk about here, when it comes to prioritization, you've told that story before about Marty Monahan, your really good friend. All right. And talk real quick about putting your people first, because you know where I'm going with this, because we're going to talk about number 1 and number 2 in a second here.
Sure. And for those of you that have been listening to us for a while, you may have even heard this story, because frankly, it applies to so many different aspects of what we do and what officers do and what happens in firehouses all around the country. But it's a great story. And it's a story about a friend of mine who was a captain in the FDNY, working on an engine company one night. He was there, and big job in the middle of the winter, but he's frozen. They're there for hours, and eventually he realizes, holy cow, we've been there for a long time. Let me check with the chief, see if I can get out of here, which we do in the FDNY. That's routine. They relieve some of the first 2 companies, and when it gets to be a long, dragged-out operation. Anyway, he runs over to the chief, says, oh yeah, man, I thought you guys were gone already. You're on the first alarm. Like, yeah, can you get your rig out of here? Yeah, we can get out. All right, yeah, get out of here, get back to quarters and warm the guys up and get them fed. He said, listen, Cap, do me a favor. Go right in service if you can. He said, we get a lot of relocators here from Manhattan and from Queens, and I don't like too many relocators. It'd be nice if there's just some regular companies know where they're going for the streets and all that. And he says, oh, yeah, you got it, Chief, no problem. So off they go back to quarters, pull back in quarters, backing in, and first thing he says to the senior man was, tell the guys, get the rig in service, man, first, no matter what. Fill up the booster tank. Let's change the bottles out. Make sure the fuel's topped off and everything's ready to go. Okay, Cap, you guys, nothing else. Just get that done first. You got it. 15 minutes later, there's a knock on the door. He's upstairs. Okay, Cap, it's all done. Well, rig's ready to go. He said, good. He said, tell the guys now they can, shower and change and put the laundry on and do what they got to do. And we're in service. Chiefs want us in service right now. We may have to run out the door, but tell them they can get ready and shower up. Good. Off he goes. Another 15 minutes comes by. Hey, Cap, we're all done. All right, good. He said, listen, we've been lucky. We haven't even had a run. Come put dinner on, and let's see if we can get something to eat before we even get out of here again. Maybe get another run. And boom, they go down and put dinner on, and then what did he do next, my friend? What did the officer do then next? Then he took a cold shower.
Why did he take a cold shower?
Right, obvious. Single firehouse. They don't have much hot water they had. He knew he had 5 firefighters in himself, and after they all got done, the last firefighter might have taken a cold shower if he didn't get in there quick or if the guys didn't cut him short. But he knew that, and he was a great officer, and he always took care of his people first, ahead of him, and he knew that even though it was going to be a rough night for them and they'd already gotten some work under their belt, he wanted to take care of them first. So, it brings me back to that book, The Mission, the Men, and We. We've talked about that before as a whole topic, as a whole discussion one time. But So I think those priorities apply as much equally to the fire service as they do to the military and other branches of service as well, military and non-military. That, you know what, the mission, the men and me. And it's a long book and it's a great book. But you can sum that whole title up by saying the mission comes first. We got to take care of the fires first. We got to put fires out. We got to go on runs. Runs come first. The men, which is the firefighters, men, women, the folks that work for us, and me. And in that title, me is considered the officer. Me is considered lieutenant, the captain, the sergeant, the Marine Corps, the police department, whatever it is. You got to know you come last. You don't get promoted. You might be getting promoted up the chain of command as far as pay and stature, but not as far as importance. And if you're a good boss, you're taking care of your people well ahead of you, even sacrificing your own comfort and your own food and your own hot water and your own whatever, so that your people are taken care of. And that's what makes loyal employees, and that's what makes good bosses, you know? Well,
and I asked you to tell that story again, because we've mentioned that a couple of times on our old school podcast. We've mentioned that with our fire engineering podcast, the Command Post, and we mentioned it a ton of times in class, over and over again, because it's such a great message about, your people always come first. The men and women who work for you always come first. So hands down, no argument there. Number one, your people come first in the firehouse of what you do. However, John, and this is kind of where I was going with this. I've talked about this in class before. You even did an article on this, I think, about we kind of, we have a way sometimes of overthinking things in the fire service, taking things to an extreme, running things out over the edge, off the pier, into the water, into the deep, and all that stuff, instead of stopping somewhere. And you and I are all about safety of our people. We're all about keeping our people healthy, safe, and alive. I always tell the story. I've told it hundreds of times about being with you in your firehouse when your last day in the Bronx, and one of your young firefighters actually referred to you as a safety Nazi, and he meant it as a compliment. He goes, "You better go. You better have your seatbelt. You better have your gear on, your tools. Be ready to go to work." And the whole thing, that he knows when he hears your voice on the radio, they're getting their ass kicked in a fire, the hallway of a tenement, that things are gonna get better because he knows you put him and the guys and gals that work for you first. He absolutely knows that. And that itself is a confidence builder and a comfort thing for firefighters too. But John's, I think with a lot of just talk in the past, oh God, so many years, I'd say that probably the past 7, 8, maybe decade, maybe, things have you've seen this paradigm shift a little bit where all of a sudden, and I don't want to, well, I'll just say it, it almost appears like we've gotten selfish, where all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, we come number one and everybody else comes number two. And I understand, and you, I know you do too, we've talked about this, where when we say, we're number one, well, yeah, our people should be number one. We just said that with our training, with our safety, with our turnout gear, making sure everybody has portable radios, making sure we do everything we can from mental health awareness and counseling and coaching to leadership, to making sure our people are the best equipped, the best trained, the best in the way of their cognitive skills, their psychomotor skills, everything they need to be a great firefighter, to be able to take care of those people out there. But then there's a switch, right? There's a switch that gets thrown in a way when, and you say it best, you pull up at 2:00 in the morning, that lady's outside, and she's yelling at Chief Salka, grabbing your coat, saying, "My 10-year-old just ran back into the house after our dog." What changes right there, John?
Right. It's absolutely true. And when we say that, your people are number one, what we really mean by that is in perspective to you, compared to you as the supervisor or the boss or the leader or the officer, compared to you, they are number one, right? They come ahead of you. You got to put them ahead of you. However, now we're looking at a bigger situation, a bigger field of vision, and that's the fireground or the crash scene. And suddenly we have people, we have civilians, we have some of them, we have people that pay taxes and people that live in town and people that have been here for decades and people that are driving through on a business trip. And suddenly we have a victim, a civilian, a person trapped in a building. Guess what? None of us is number one. Suddenly they are number one. I mean, we try and treat ourselves well. We try and treat our firefighters better than we treat ourselves, meaning as officers and leaders. But once it comes down to the doors rolling up and us going outside, we're a service agency. We're here to provide service, and we're here, everybody loves getting dressed up in a uniform and saluting with the crisp white gloves and the flags and all that wonderful, wonderful stuff that signifies what we think of the service that we do and the job that we do. However, you got to listen to the words once in a while, and you got to remember the word sacrifice. Sacrifice means you're sacrificing your safety. You're sacrificing your comfort. You're sacrificing your, all the things that make you, that comfortable is one of the words. But the point is, when it comes to people that need help, those are the things that get sacrificed. Suddenly we have to operate out on a slippery highway. We have to stop the rig, get off the rig, yell at each other, guys, somebody watch back there, make sure none of these trucks slide into us. Billy and Tommy, go up to the rig and see if you get them people out, or somebody's got to jump in the water without scuba gear, without a life preserver on, because there's a car sinking right in front of you with people hanging out the windows. You got to go down a hallway, even though you're fully geared up, even though you got a hose line, even though you're trained. Guess what? You're crawling into a burning building. You were outside, you're crawling in. You're sacrificing yourself to some degree. You're sacrificing or risking, injury and all sorts of other things. And it goes all the way up the chain, to the end, right? And I think we have to remember that. And sometimes I think when you don't do that a lot, when you don't have a lot of life-saving situations, when you don't have a lot of working fires with people trapped or things of that nature, sometimes I think we get a little lazy. It's just human nature. We get a little lazy and we start to think about our own comfort first. We start to be interrupted. Oh, they're interrupting another meal. We just sat down for this meal. Now we got to go out on a run. And suddenly you start to take on this victim attitude that, oh my God, we got to go out there again and miss this hot meal, or we went out 3 times last night after midnight. Oh my goodness, your good night's sleep was interrupted. You know what I'm saying? And we're not being sarcastic, because nobody likes their sleep interrupted. But when you're at work, that's part of the job, And all we are number 2 really means is just remember that when it hits the fan, those folks out there, they just stepped up a notch. They are the priority, and we got to do what we got to do.
Well, exactly. And I want to go back to something you hit on that I kind of led down too is, yeah, absolutely. We want to take care of our people, make sure they're best equipped, and make sure that, one of the things we've talked about, I use it as a model. Boy, Darien Woodridge and Coeur d'Alene and in Louisville, our risk, assessment, kind of thing of, our risk, our statement, if you will. And that was, the 3 different groups where we'll risk our lives a lot in a highly calculated, controlled manner to save a savable life. That was number 1. We'll risk our lives a little to save savable property in a highly calculated, controlled manner, and we'll not risk our lives at all for property lives already lost. And I think the majority of the firefighters and officers I meet, John, do just that and take the fanciness out of it. When you're talking to a firefighter, say, well, in a highly calculated and controlled, manner, calculated, right? We get there. That's what we talked about. This is where you calculate is, I know building construction. I know fire behavior. I know how much water comes out of the hose. I know how much hose I have. I know tools, equipment, everything that goes into, you just be able to stand there and make a highly calculated decision. And all those factors, and this is a lot of the cognitive skills, a lot of the training stuff. And then controlled is quite simple. Those are your SOPs, your SOGs. That's your accountability system, the incident command system, good officers, good leadership, and all stuff. So when you're making decisions based, and we all do this, based on a highly calculated, controlled manner, then and then only, you, just like you said, you make that decision. You know what? All my training, everything I paid off, enables me right now to take the risk I need to take to save a savable life. I know there's someone, or I think there's someone. You know what, guys? This is why we've done all the training we've done with darked out, zero reduced visibility masks. This is why we did the room orientation drills. So we crawl inside this building with zero visibility and look for someone who's gasping for last breath of air or needs us to start breathing for them again. This is why we stretch hose, and we stretch it sometimes in semi-hostile conditions so we can get in there and apply water and different methods on applying water. This is why we train with our air packs or SCBAs. This is why we train in RIT Mayday. This is why we do all this stuff we do. And forget just the fire scene, how we cut cars apart. You just mentioned dive rescue, swift water, all these things we do. Folks, for our listeners, we are not sitting here condoning crazy ass stupid behavior. In fact, let's go back to what John's guys in the Bronx, his firefighters, referred to him as a safety Nazi, meaning, look, he wants you. You better be able to kick ass and take names and do your job. But you don't do stupid shit. You don't do stupid stuff, because we want everybody to go home. So that to be able to make that decision, and you've got someone inside, like I said, you use in class all the time. You pull up, it's 2 a.m. That mom told you that her 10-year-old ran back after a puppy, you take your helmet. You say this all the time, John, in class. You go, you take your helmet off. You look inside your helmet as you go to mask up. There's a number 2 in there. Number 1's that kid there. Now, back to the highly calculated control. Now you get inside, you're making a hallway, and it's just shit, man. It's just ginning, like they say. And you know what? You're to a point where you just can't go any further. This is where your knowledge base, your cognitive skills, your training pays off, that you can make the decisions you need to make as to how far and what you can do. Because there's a point where you go, this ain't working. We can't do this. We have to find a different avenue or whatever. That's that first part. You know what I'm saying? So go ahead, buddy.
And that's the great thing. There's 2 points here. The first one is, sometimes it's hard to figure out where that line is between risking a lot and really making a move and doing it the best way you can, and freelancing and maybe going a little bit too far. Because we all know people that are like, wow, that guy is unbelievable. If there's a rescue to be made, he can do it. And then we also all know people that, oh man, this guy is crazy. He'll go beyond what anybody else would do. And I'm not saying either one of those 2 firefighters do the exact same thing all the time, but we know sometimes we got to push. We know sometimes we got to risk a little bit more, like you said, for somebody who's really at risk themselves. And you got to be able to know when to do that. When to say, okay, fellas, that's it. Come on, back out. We're not going to make this. You got to know there's a point. And the same thing with that risk versus reward decision making that we do all the time. You might make that decision 3 times going down one hallway to keep going. And then you finally get at the end and say, you know what, either we need another line here, we're going to have to back out. We got no lines right now. Okay, guys, we're going to back out. And then you decide you're not going to go any farther. So that's an important part too.
And you mentioned this a bunch of times. I have too. Part of that, like we're talking about, in a highly calculated control manner, the knowledge base and the skills base, and bringing your knowledge and your hands-on skills together to be able to make those decisions. Now let's turn back a page as to what you learned from people like a Ray Downey, a Pete Lund, a Bill Allen, where both of us were able to. You and I have both been there where and I know guys have said about us, but I'm paying compliment to our bosses, our mentors, where we looked and went, does he really wants us to go where? Really, we're going to go down in that. I mean, where you're like, this guy's out of his mind. It's like that tribute to Ray Downey after 9/11. When one of the guys said there were times he'd throw an order out there. We're like, what? Why does he want to do that? Why are we doing this? And 15 minutes later, that order would come into play. Well, I remember Todd Cervenka, one of my captains, kneeing me so hard in my ass to get me up the stairs into this fire. He hit my tailbone. Where you get that little buzz in your spine. And I'm like, gee, and he was pushing the back of my bottle up into my, and I'm like, damn it, I got the hose. And I realized he was right. I'm saying this is experience. This is somebody that knows how far to go. Actually, Rick, where you're laying on the stairs is a very bad position. Like right basement fires, get down, get off the staircase, get out of the flow, get out of flow path, get out of path. Especially you open the nozzle, that steams that come up. That's how guys get chased. Right? They hang up. They get halfway on the basement stairs, John. They open up the line. The steam comes back, and then they go screaming up the stairs, and they get hurt, or they drop the line. Instead of beating ass down the stairs, getting off on your shoulder, hitting it, letting the steam and everything go right up above you out the top. But this is where people like Pete Lund and Bill Allen taught us, look, that's why I'm in charge. Follow me. I'm not going to get you hurt. And right, you've said it before, where there's been times you've doubted going, look, I follow orders. I'm going with them. But inside your head, you're going, holy crap, man, is this guy out of his mind? Only to find out he was right out.
It's not always dramatic stuff. It's not always life-saving stuff. Sometimes it's the woman across the street coming over to the firehouse asking for assistance with something, getting a smoke detector put up, or her self-closing door is not working and she's afraid that, some smoke's going to come in, or even a kid that's lost in the neighborhood. I mean, sometimes you're just sitting down for dinner in the firehouse or lunch, you got a great meal going, and all of a sudden there's a knock on the door. Hey, Lieutenant Smithwick, you got somebody at the front door here. And all of a sudden you realize, it's going to be a public service call. Okay, guys, let's go, going out. And nobody wants to ruin lunch or leave it on the table and get cold or get warm or whatever it is. But that's all part of it. At every turn, at every call, at every suggestion, anybody who knocks on the door that needs help, we put down what we're doing and we go and help. That's the only reason you're there, is to serve the public and help them. Not some bothersome guy that comes by every single day with ridiculous, useless, requests. Although you'd probably be helping him for a while before you realize that was. But, when somebody knocks on the door or somebody calls up the dispatcher, I've never heard a dispatcher say, sorry, we don't do that. Here's a number. You got to call. I've never heard that done. When we get called out, we do it, even if it's stuff that we normally don't do. I mean, look what's going on right now with this coronavirus. There's gigantic things happening all over the country, and fire departments are doing what? Answering calls. Some guys are answering tremendous amounts of calls. Some guys' calls went down the drain. They answered nothing. Haven't had a call in 3 days.
We can't put the phones on call forwarding, right? We're it.
We are the end of the line. We're the last telephone pole on the road. When people are looking for help, they get to us. There's nobody behind us. It's us. And I love cops and I love military, but not even them. It's always us. You can't pull a firebox in New York City and not have a fire truck pull up. Impossible. It might be 332 engine from Brooklyn relocated to 48 engine in the Bronx because there's a fifth alarm going somewhere, but somebody's going to show up there, and it's not going to be long. And 3, 4, 5 guys are going to pile off that rig. What do you need, lady? Whether she's bleeding, whether she's crying, whether it's a kid that looks lost, and these are all it sounds like a commercial, to be a firefighter, but it's absolutely true. And if that's not true in your fire department, if that isn't absolutely true, that when somebody calls, they send somebody, no matter what it is, then you should think about changing policy. You should think about what it is you're doing for your community, because it's the only reason you're there. It's the only reason they fuel up them rigs and put light bulbs and the lights in the firehouses so you can be ready to go out the door and help them.
Exactly. We said this. They dial 911 for us. We can't dial 912. We're the end of the. There's no. Well, we'll just put you on hold, or we won't answer the phone, or we're too busy. You're exactly right. And that's back to again, where this number 2 thing again. And I want to emphasize. John said it earlier. I said earlier. It does not mean we're throwing caution to the wind, and we don't care about. It's actually. Pick up on what we're saying here. Are your people always come first with your training and with how you take care of them? But there's a point where that flips to where now you take all that training, all that education, all that experience, all that leadership, and you know what? It's time to do your job. It's time to go to work. It's time to earn your paycheck, right? Or volunteer or not. You know what I'm talking about. Time to go do your job. So number 1, we talked about when there's a savable life, we do whatever we can. We do whatever we can, and as I said, in a highly calculated, controlled manner, with our experience and our training, to do what we got to do to save whoever that is. Sometimes, you right. One of your buddies, Patty Brown, was known for. A lot of people said it, but he was known for a lot of different quotes. One of them was, "You can be the safest fire department in America, and it's still going to be a dangerous job. It's a dangerous freaking job we do." So then, number 2, John, out of that is, and our risk management statement is. We risk our lives a little in a highly calculated, controlled manner to save us, savable property. Isn't that true? Do we not? I know I already know what you're going to say, but do we not risk our lives a little again, back to the highly calculated, controlled, knowing building construction, being safety conscious, knowing our capabilities, our limitations, all that different stuff, our training, experience, leadership, to save savable property? Don't we do that for people?
Absolutely, and there's people out there that don't think so. No, obviously you're making some different decisions there. You're not going to quite risk as much or go as far, conditions, but we still do it. You still have to save people's homes. I mean, there are people that don't have insurance. There are people that don't have insurance in their apartment. There are people that own homes that have very low insurance with very high deductibles. And if something burns down, they're going to end up with a fraction of what they started with. Obviously, possessions are possessions compared to a life. We're going to go much further for a life. We're going to risk a lot more for a life. But we are paid to do both. We're paid and asked and sworn to protect lives and property. And you have to be able to measure the difference there, but it's also what we do.
Well, exactly. And again, as we break those 3, assignments, if you will, into those 3 categories where, again, risking our lives a lot to save us, high calculated, control manner, save a savable life. We talk about that. We'll risk a little to save savable property, but we're not risk our lives at all for lives and property that were lost. And this is where it gets really iffy, John, because, for some people, I'm a big believer as good bosses, good leaders, good tacticians can pull up and make that decision and go, this is done. It's over with. The building's shot in the head or whatever. Lately you can't read a story on fireengineer.com or firehouse.com about a vacant building all of a sudden that doesn't have squatters, doesn't have people in there. Well, it wasn't actually vacant. There were people in there or whatever. Now, you pull up and you've got a building all boarded up, looking crap in your house. Do we get as aggressive as this? You got mom out there saying my 10-year-old's in there? No. but we still fight fires. We still make every attempt to search searchable areas. It goes back to what you and I talked about on a show not too long ago. We both love the close the door campaign. We've been saying this for years to residents, close the damn door. To firefighters, if you're doing vent or search, close the door, isolate, all this stuff. We're telling little kids and people to close the door and wait for us because we're coming. And at times we're not really coming, or we're going to be about 10 minutes delayed because we're standing outside. Now, again, we've talked about this a bunch of times. There are times where you need to do a transitional attack as a manpower, staffing, whatever you've got going. There's only a couple of you on the rig or whatever. We all understand that. But there's a point where, and you and I've talked about this a bunch of times before. Actually, there was a great conversation with Alan Brunacini on our podcast, Fire Engineering, years and years ago, was we need to start treating buildings like we treat patients. And that is, if South Blooming Grove or Louisville went to a gunshot wound to the head, got to a gun, shot himself in the head. You get there, your paramedics do their first round of drugs for the family, right? Excuse me, first round of drugs for the family, and off you go. And you get back to quarters, and the guys go, "What'd you have, Chief?" You go, "Oh, guy shot himself in the head." They go, "Did he make it?" Excuse me. And you go, "No, silly, little hole here, big hole here." Ooh, they don't call you Dr. Death or nothing. But if you go out to a fire and they go, "Hey, what'd you guys do?" And they go, "Oh, Salka backed us out. We put one on the ground. We put one on the ground." You know what I'm saying? We put one on the ground. You come back to quarters, and what do they say to you? "Oh, a bunch of foundation savers." And we actually guilt our people into going to buildings they should be going into. And that's kind of where I'm going with this. There should be a way, I hope to God, that you can decide which is an environment you could put your people in, and one that you can't. And I love that. Every now and then you got to treat a building like a shot in the head. You've done it in the Bronx. You pulled up and said, "Guys, no, nobody goes in. The building's done. It's gone. There's nothing in there. There's nothing. Every room is full." You know what I'm saying? There's a point where you go, "Guys, the building's shot in the head. We do our first round of drugs for the family, which is water, and we're going to protect our people," right?
Absolutely. And that's the important part of being, an officer, an incident commander, a battalion chief, a district chief, whatever your rank is, whatever your role is. Those are the unseen things. Those are the things that, we could talk about it all day long. You can go take a class on it. You can read a book on it, and it's still difficult concepts to understand. And then they're further compounded by the fact that when you get to the scene of an incident, it's not like any other incident you've ever been to. It might be just a little bit more serious. There might be a little bit more risk. There might be a lot more risk. There might be a skosh less risk. Every incident is different. It's never a repeat of a previous one. So even all your experience to some degree still has to be looked over before you can make a decision at your next incident, because it's different than the 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 that you've already done. So, and it's real important. The good thing about it is we're able to correct and adjust. You start heading in, you start stretching in, and all of a sudden you realize, man, wait a minute, guys, this is not working. All right, open up them lines out here. Stay on the front lawn for a minute. We got to darken this down. So we can easily change sometimes, but that's if you're still on the front lawn. You get 2 lines inside 10 feet before things start going bad. You might end up, with a more dramatic, dangerous situation. Absolutely, both for us and civilians, the folks that we're trying to rescue. Yeah.
Well, exactly. So, and we've been talking about that very thing about, the title of this particular podcast was "We're Number Two." We're number two. We explained how that works, and that, when we kind of switch around with that, when we know what number one means for our people and all that. John, as we close things out here, summarize, run us through that. Run us through this whole "we're number two" thing, in summary here, what we just talked about.
In summary is, and again, I think we hit it pretty accurately right up front, is obviously we know we're important. We're the caregivers, we're the first responders, we're the firefighters, and our safety and security is important. And it's the job of our officers and chiefs to make sure that happens. But what we also have to remember is once we come out of the firehouse, once we go to work, once the bells ring, then there's a slight shift. Then suddenly we shift from being number one to being number two. We're number one on the drill site. We're number one inside the firehouse. We're number one when we're training. But then suddenly when there's an alarm, someone else is now in danger. And we have to take a short step back into the number two position and remember that we come second and those folks come first, and we have to make every effort to try and get that done. Now, sometimes we don't, or sometimes we can't, and those things happen. but that's not the kind of thing we're planning on or looking forward to. Most of the time, we're looking to be successful and elevate whoever it is that called us to the number one position for the duration of that incident.
So there it is. So train your people, equip your people. If you're a boss, make sure your people have everything they need to do their job safely and efficiently. Get your people prepared as a company officer. Train them so they're the best at what they can be, because it's all about those people out there. We're no good to them if we're not at our best. You know, we're at our best when someone's at their worst. We've said that for years. That's what we train. And then you can actually spin it around, like you said, where we get there and we do our risk assessment and we go to work. We go do our job. So. Hey, buddy, that's another one. We just got through talking about, we're number 2. Again, to our listeners, firehouse.com, fireengine.com, great information out there. Firefighter Nation, UIL, I'm talking sports again. UL's does some great stuff. NIOSH, we've talked about them as another great resource for injuries and line of duty deaths, or for our particular business as we're selfishly talking about us. So there's a wealth of information out there for you to dig through. But that's it, John. If they want to get a hold of you,
Chief John Salka at gmail.com.
And I'm Chief Lasky at gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe either to iTunes or to go to my YouTube channel. If you're listening on YouTube right now, make sure you subscribe. So that way you get these notifications when we post our old school podcast right away. So that being said, we always ask you to keep the men and women and the armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. Keep our brothers and sisters in law enforcement as well there. And remember, never forgetting means never forgetting. Thank you. God bless you. And be safe.